Welcome to the Author Tower. My name is Fred Durham, and I represent the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We are a volunteer organization whose mission is to promote writing and writers on the institution grounds, and we hope even beyond, by both supporting and supplementing the activities of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We do that by sponsoring events. I'll tell you about the weekly events first. On Sundays at 5 o'clock in the Rose Room on the second floor of this building, writers and listeners 18 years old and above, are you all over 18? Yes, okay. Are invited to participate in an open mic session. You usually get to read about 3 to 5 minutes of your work. On Fridays at 1:15, usually in the garden room, but because of the silent auction, it will be on the second floor. The room yet to be determined, but it'll be announced on Friday. We offer an informal critique session. Writers are invited to bring in 10 copies of one single-spaced page of their prose or poetry for feedback, guided by John Brantingham. He's a professional writer and a professor who has taught courses at the Writers Center they have to pay for, but this you get for free. And today, as part of the Tuesday Authors Hour reading series, 2 Chautauqua writers will present their work. I will tell you about our special annual event after our first author read. Our one author will have books for sale, and after the 2 readings, we will have time for a short Q&A session. So if you have any questions, try to remember them for that session. Our first reader, Dr. Janet Crosier, is a professor of literature and writing at Western New England University and Springfield Technical Community College. She has a background in creative writing and American and British literature with a specialization in Emily Bronte. She has authored many academic articles and research presentations, as well as publishing poetry and short fiction in the University of Massachusetts Anthology, with a More Than You See, a workplace writer series. Shadows on the Heath, her first novel, relates to her interest in Emily Bronte and was published in 2023. And she has a new work coming out soon. Please welcome Dr. Janet Crosier.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, anybody who came, and I remember my reading glasses this time. Was said, my book is called Shadows on the Heath, representative of both the heath that grows on the moors in England and Heathcliff from Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. I think the best thing I can do to intro this is just read the short author's note at the beginning of the book, and then I'll read a little bit. It says, when I was a little girl, I watched Florence Olivier's portrayal of Heathcliff in William Wyler's movie version of Wuthering Heights, and my love affair with Emily Bronte's story then began. In Wuthering Heights, Bronte's most famous character, Heathcliff, leaves for 3 years after Cathy has broken his heart. During his time away, he becomes transformed from an angry plowboy to a confident, wealthy soldier and gentleman. The reader is never told how these changes come about. I wrote Shadows on the Heath to show my respect for Emily Bronte, her novel Wuthering Heights, and her most famous character, Heathcliff. Shadows on the Heath is my attempt to explain Heathcliff's transformation, or one possibility. Part 1, Heathcliff. Chapter 1. Now, many years after Mr. Heathcliff's death, I, known by most as Lockwood, came to possess a parcel sent by courier one day in early spring. It contained papers revealing a strange tale of Mr. Heathcliff's flight from Wuthering Heights a little more than 25 years before. There were letters and diary pages, Some mere scraps of paper holding only a line or two, evidently scrawled by the hand of Mr. Heathcliff himself. It was obvious to me who had sent these, but why? Were they intended simply for my entertainment? I had once been Mr. Heathcliff's tenant, but that gave me no claim to such information. Was I meant to reply to the sender? As the boy who delivered the parcel into my hands had said nothing, perhaps no response was expected. I must examine the contents of this rather large box in some detail before making such a determination. I would find an explanation much sooner than anticipated. Before I was able to make any further progress with my search, a second knock came on my door. It was the same young man who had brought the parcel less than an hour previous. "And young man, what can I do for you?" He held out a trembling hand and handed me an envelope, somewhat wrinkled but otherwise in good condition. "Please, sir, Mrs. asked me to give this to you with the parcel, only I had it in my pocket for safekeeping and I forgot. Please don't tell me." I assured him I would not let on about his mistake, gave him 2 pence for his hard work, and sent him on his way, back into the rain and late morning gloom. The rain brought with it a heavy fog, making the air quite cold for a spring day. I watched the young boy until he disappeared. Then, shutting the door, I returned to the fireplace, bright with the blaze lit in early morning, to fight off the chill air. Despite the fire's warmth, however, the envelope felt like ice to my hands. I'd come to live in town these past 5 years. Oh, could it really have been such a short time since I had last been there? It seemed quite a lifetime ago, yet at moments as real as yesterday. The firelight cast a shadowy glow upon the envelope in my hand, but still I felt no heat from its flames at all. Instead, coldness started deep in my bones, running from the base of my spine up into my neck and down my arms, as I looked around my apartment for perhaps the last time. It had served well as home for me, lone bachelor that I am. A large desk stood in one corner, neat to a fault. It appeared no work could ever have passed over the bright surface of polished oak, still smooth and shiny, yet within the drawers and hidden compartments lay evidence of my work over these past 5 years. My eyes left the comfort of this old friend, scanning the table and chair placed near the fire. It was here I spent many a winter night, safe from the elements outdoors. I found comfort mostly in books, shelves of which lined the walls on either side of the stone fireplace. Upstairs, a single bedroom housed my personal belongings. The solitary room, meant as a haven from the day's harsh treatment, it proved little more than a place to lay my head at night. But I need not complain. It was I who chose such a solitary life. No, London had been a good choice after leaving the country and its haunting memories behind. With a brief sigh, I turned my attention back to the brown-covered box now sitting on my table alongside the tea tray, cups, and tea server. Shivering, I examined the envelope given me by the young lad, turning it over and over in my hand. It seemed a desolate place I had sworn never again to let be part of my existence was once again demanding my attention, Wuthering Heights. I broke the red wax seal. "Dear Mr. Lockwood, I hope this letter finds you well and prosperous in your new home. I am writing to inform you of the recent death of someone I know to have been dear to you, our family friend and servant, Nellie Dean. In the fall, Miss Nellie came down with a fever. For a while, we thought she might rally, but she refused to see the doctor, so I spent every day with her until the last. The end came quickly. Less than 1 month after Nellie took to her bed, she died. Her last words to me were to please send you the accompanying parcel. I trust you are well, Mr. Lockwood, and your new life has brought you happiness. If you ever venture near Wuthering Heights again, I should be glad to receive you as our guest. Yours gratefully, Catherine Earnshaw." My fingers shook as I viewed the signature. I read the name again, Catherine Earnshaw, smiling until my face ached. My palms began to sweat. Warm memories came flooding back of young Catherine, now mistress of Wuthering Heights, with her kind eyes and gentle smile. I occupied myself throughout the entire day and long into the evening examining the contents of this unexpected arrival. Numerous papers had faded too much to provide any useful information. Other pages had been reduced to mere scraps, likely the handiwork of mice settling down for the winter among the pages of newsprint and stationery. I lifted an envelope still holding the sweet fragrance of perfume within the folds of light parchment paper. Inside were many letters, or rather the beginnings of letters, love letters from Heathcliff to his beloved Cathy, mother of Catherine Earnshaw, the current mistress of Wuthering Heights. I could feel my heart pounding there was a slight stinging behind my eyes. I was sure the intended recipient of these letters had never read their contents. I unfolded the first letter. I watched as a tear fell onto the cracked paper and rolled across the scrawled handwriting of many years past. Cathy's name blurred before my eyes, and fear seized my heart. I rushed to find a handkerchief in my coat pocket. I must blot out any tears before further damage should happen to this treasured history of my former landlord. How strange it felt to refer to Heathcliff as my landlord still. I had not lived at the Grange for many years. Yet I could hardly call Heathcliff my friend. I doubted many ever called him friend. Beyond Cathy and Nellie Dean, I could think of none who would dare be a friend to such a creature. I refolded the letter with great care for later reading when I might better trust my emotions. As I returned the letter to the packet, I spied some thick brown paper buried at the bottom. I picked it up and removed the many layers of wrapping. Inside was a key. There was no explanation, just a key. I turned it over and over in my hands. What might it open? Why had someone sent it to me? The more I stared at this small secret item, the more it called me back to Wuthering Heights to find its rightful owner. I paced the bedroom floor. No, I cannot return north. I shook my head in disbelief. When I finally retired to bed, dreams of the dead returning to haunt their enemies plagued my sleep. I rose early the following morning and reread Catherine's letter. She did invite me to Wuthering Heights. Should I consider such a trip? I tapped my fingers against the table as my coffee grew cold. I soon found myself packing my belongings in preparation for the long journey. I arranged for a neighbor and friend of mine, Mr. Edward Samuels, to look after things while I was away. Having no knowledge as to the length of my stay, I left monetary arrangements quite open. I placed the funds sufficient for several months in a bank account in both our names. Managing my affairs would be quite an easy task for Samuel, as my life was a simple one. I kept mostly to myself, seeking the company of others only on occasion. The same events which had caused me to become tenant to the master of Wuthering Heights many years ago still held control over my personal life. Mr. Heathcliff's history, once told to me by Nellie Dean a long time ago, would haunt my very existence from that time forward. Perhaps those events had deepened my need to live in quiet solitude. I found I now too believed, as did the simple folk who live in the counties surrounding the heights, of spirits who inhabit the death-like moors in the desolate countryside. Though the bodies of both Heathcliff and his beloved Catherine lay buried beneath the soil in an ancient cemetery, I knew their spirits did not remain within an earthly prison. No, they roamed free, across the moors, even into the houses of those living in the once joyous, now pain-filled homes. I shook my head, hoping to erase thoughts of spirits and ghosts. This was no way to enter upon a visit to my past, half afraid of Heathcliff watching my every move, listening to my queries into his life once again. Only this time I would ask my questions to the young Catherine. My spirits lightened, and I felt a smile cross my face as I thought back to what she'd been like when I had last visited Wuthering Heights. Then the mistress had been young and beautiful. I had learned she had little else in common with her mother, but she could fight like a wild animal, protecting the young if the occasion rose. Her fighting was without temper, however, free as she was from any vengeful nature. No selfish interest existed as there had been with her mother, and this she inherited the self-sacrificing grace of her father. I shrugged my shoulders and sighed as I realized my true depth of feeling towards Catherine. The first time I set eyes on her, she had won a special place in my heart, and she was never to be mine. The idea never once crossed her pretty mind, of that I was most certain. A man, many years her senior, and tenant of her much-hated former father-in-law, would never have been a character worthy of her affections. Her marriage to Heathcliff's son had brought with it a life of hard work and cruelty, something she wasn't likely to risk repeating on the life of a stranger such as I was at that time. How much would 5 years have changed the lady of the house? Was she still happily married to Hareton, Heathcliff's nephew and rightful owner of Wuthering Heights, and my former residence, Rushcross Grange? I would learn the answer soon at the end of my journey, or so I hoped. Chapter 2. I set out early in the morning, several days after the arrival of that fateful package. The day was mild, with a slight chill, making it feel more like spring than summer. A mist hovered a few feet above the ground, like a cloud that had lost its way and somehow sank to earth. An eerie shiver ran up my back as I stepped into the carriage. I was the only passenger at this early hour, but there were sure to be others joining me at the next town. I sat back against the cushioned seat and placed my hat and cane beside me. The driver tied my bundle to the back of the carriage, climbed in his seat up front, and signaled the horses to proceed. A ghost-like mist engulfed the buildings as we made our way down the main street. The townspeople out of doors, readying their businesses for the day's first customers, moved about in the fog, which settled partway up their bodies. They clung to their legs and arms, making every move slow and dreamlike. I turned my head as far as I could, waiting for something or someone to emerge from that mist. Soon all was out of sight, yet my eyes remained fixed in their direction. The carriage hit a rock in the roadway and jolted me back to my senses. Once again, I settled myself against the seat, closing my eyes, hoping to replace these ghostly images with pleasant memories of young Catherine or Nellie Dean. The carriage started rocking from side to side, and the wind howled. We were heading straight into a storm. A biting wind blew in through the cracks around the windows and the door. I pulled my collar around my ears. I could sense the steepness of the terrain and knew the speed at which the driver pushed the horses spelled certain disaster. I found myself thrown about inside the carriage. I yelled to the driver to slow down. He did not. The carriage, now out of control, careened over a precipice. Tossed about like a tiny ship on a stormy sea, I readied myself for inevitable death. Over and over we rolled. I could hold on to my seat no longer, and the carriage door flew open. When I came to, a blinding snow was falling. I had no idea how far the carriage had rolled before throwing me out the door. I tried to stand, but my legs gave way. I knew if I stayed where I lay, I faced the promise of frozen snow burying me from sight. No one might ever pass this way, and if the driver were dead, which I was certain he must be after such a crash, the existence of his sole passenger might never be known. I lunged forward, crawling as the feeling returned to my legs. I moved along the side of the carriage, searching for the driver. His dead body slumped forward, still holding onto the reins, torn free from the team of horses, which had broken loose and disappeared into the storm. I turned from this gruesome scene, once again wading through the deep snow. After several moments of searching, I felt stones rising in a row to my left. I pulled my body upright and braced myself against a crumbling stone fence, trying to get my bearings about me. The only sign of life was that fence. Perhaps it would lead to a farm. If nothing else, it might lead to a cemetery. Stone fences such as this surrounded many cemeteries in this part of England, and even a graveyard would offer sanctuary from this temple. I scraped my hands along the stone. Blood droplets on the white snow might paint a trail and lead to my eventual rescue. After some time, the rough stones changed to splintered wood. I felt a gate, which I hoped might open upon some form of shelter. My heart pounded in my ears as my numb fingers fumbled for a latch to open the gate. Out of the white, a huge black gloved hand crashed down upon my own, now frozen with ice and snow. Pain screeched up my arm into my shoulder. My agonizing cries deepened, but still the gloved hand held tight. When my eyes cleared, I beheld the master of old. He laughed, holding me prisoner against the gate I had hoped might lead to my relief. I shook my head. No, it could not be. He was dead. I must be mistaken. Perhaps the crash and freezing snow were playing a cruel trick upon my eyes. Without warning, he freed my hand and swung open the gate. It was the same gate I had passed through several years back in a similar snowstorm. I found no hope inside and tried to run. My frozen feet stumbled, and I felt myself falling into darkness once more. The jolt brought me to, and when I opened my eyes, I spied two women sitting across me in the same carriage I had entered earlier that morning. Everything remained intact. There was no evidence of any crash. I turned my face to the window, bewildered. A slight drizzle was falling outside, but there was no sign of snow anywhere. Where and when had these women stepped into the carriage? After nodding a silent greeting to these two passengers, I peered out the window again, seeking to gain some knowledge as to my whereabouts. The landscape had grown steep, and the carriage's pace was now much slower than before. There were small bushes on either side of the road, and in the distance, moors covered with heath and furze so familiar to the Yorkshire countryside. Having gained a modicum of composure after my earlier nightmare and estimating my travels might be nearing my end, I turned my attention to my new riding companions. I'll kind of leave you there, mystery of the riding companions, but I realized the first few chapters are all, setting you up for actually Heathcliff through the pages of those letters and diary pieces and his, what he does to gain enough rewards to become rich and educated and become a soldier. So I did lots of years of research for this novel, probably about 20 years, just to make sure it was super accurate. So I hope it's intriguing to some of you and you might be willing to read it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Janet. A very strong sense of place, and I'm eager to find out what the key is soon. As I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about our special annual event sponsored by the Transition Talk Writer Center. One is coming up this Sunday, the 13th, from 11:30 to 2 o'clock on Vester Plaza. Is the Authors Among Us book fair, and I see the person who first originated that sitting back there. Hi, Clara. We have several authors signed up, but there's still room. So if you have a book you've published, and since you're here, you're a Chautauquan, you can go to this website that I'll repeat several times, chq.org/SCWC, for all the Friends of Chautauqua Writers Center events. The annual writing contest for writers of all ages closes on July 27th. You can find out more about the rules and how to submit your work at, once again, chq.org/SCWC. Finally, on August 4th, the Friends will hold the annual Robert Pinsky Favorite Poem Project at 5 o'clock in the Hall of Philosophy. At this gathering, select Chautauquans read their favorite poem, not by themselves or a family member, and briefly explain why it means so much to them. And that's right, applications for this event are available at chq.org/SCWC. Reminder, Q&A following our second reader, and Dr. Crosier has books for sale. Our second reader is Estelle Rauch. She is a retired psychotherapist and part-time university instructor who wrote nonfiction for her profession, published textbook and journal articles, and created many lectures and workshops. In retirement, she has shifted to writing fiction and hosting classes on the novel and short story in a Naples, Florida university. Masters of Betrayal, a complex psychological mystery, is the latest of 3 novels, including Sally's Dreams and Trapped, and all are available on Amazon. Estelle,
Thank you.
forward.
Thank you, Fred. Notice I'm shorter than previous presenters. Therefore, I have to stand here. I also want to talk to you, and then we'll read like 2 minutes on 2 different examples of what I'm talking about. I became aware of the value of short fiction, we call flash fiction, which is defined loosely as under 1,000 words. But last summer, in the August, 10th example of the New Yorker magazine, which I have hosted fruits of for many years in Naples, Florida, a whole issue was devoted to flash fiction. So it got me curious about it, and for that reason, because it were very interesting stories, but also because as somebody who had taught the short story and the novel for at least 10 years in Naples, having taught psychology courses for 20 years in New York, in Long Island, I was very often struck by the fact that some of the very fine examples of short stories that were actually published by the New Yorker could have been shorter. You know, they really could have been. The fact that they had famous names on them, the New Yorker probably is relatively reluctant to do too much editing, but I could do that. So I decided that I was going to experiment with writing some short fiction, flash fiction, they call it. And by the way, my coming in terms with this so late, there are actually magazines devoted to this, organizations devoted to flash fiction. If you go online and check, just list flash fiction, you will find them. My guess is they don't financially do too well. Because if somebody like me who's actually taught the subject, I've never heard of it for years, I don't know how widespread the information is. So what I'm going to do is briefly read 2 examples of my short flash fiction, and then I would like to use the balance of the time Fred's going to give me to actually have something of a dialogue with you, because that's my style. I'm sorry, that's what I like and enjoy. So even those of you in the back, hi, I hope you will participate and share your experience in perhaps writing short fiction, or your reaction just to the concept and to anything I wrote. You could say, this is the worst piece of writing I've ever heard. But being a little kind of. Okay. Sometimes I am vicious to my own writing. Okay. So the first one I call The Last Journey. And as a senior myself, I might be interested in the subject. Okay? All around him is beauty, which once provided joy. His home, artistically directed by his former wife, is poised high on several groomed acres on Long Island Sound. Across that body of water sits Fire Island, 35 miles wide, 1/4 mile deep, embraced by the Sound and the Atlantic Ocean. He had sailed spring, summer, fall with parents, with wives, with children. Unplanned, unacknowledged, the end happened. There are too many endings. Friends long dead, others living south, their only regular connection Facebook. Son daughters, having attended colleges in Texas and California, remain there. Their monthly calls and annual visits are infused with this unexpressed sadness. As he walks around his home, he fights against his own recurring, unasked questions. Who will treasure the art, the elegant furniture, the photography, the albums? This healthy, elderly man is not depressed. These days, busying himself with bridge, pickleball, Netflix, he is also not happy. Food shopping at Fairway and Trader Joe's, which began as a chore he had to take on after his divorce, is now Tuesday's welcome calendar event. Many nights, the Netflix film watch, the late night television news turned off, showered, in bed, thoughts he successfully avoids all day now intrude. What will they say about me after my death? Will anyone, apart from my broker, miss me? What have I done to warrant being missed by my children, by their children, to whom I am a telephone voice or mailed greeting card stuffed with checks? The man walks to his den, again to study the dozens of pictures placed on every surface. He embraces memories until peaceful, he falls into a dreamless sleep. Beautiful. If you'd like to comment on this story before the second one, it would be my pleasure. If you have reaction to it, by the way, I should tell you, 286 words. So, is the character, there are a few questions I can ask you. See, I'm used to being a teacher, so I'm allowed to ask you questions. Does the character come across as real? Is the environment somewhat understandable? Yeah? What's your thought? Share your reactions today. Be brave.
Yeah, that's me you're writing about, Estelle.
I know you. You want to stand up so people can actually hear you?
No, I'm in classes with Estelle, so I know her, and I know her way. But yeah, I can relate completely to that. I'm in kind of a little bit of that type of person, So yeah, I thought it was ringing really true. Very good. So, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Estelle, can you repeat what he said?
He's we know each other.
Yeah, Estelle,
By the way, from the
summarize what he said, just in case they couldn't hear him back there.
you want to take this.
Oh, no, oh, okay.
Take this.
Well, you guys
Because he's very smart.
Oh, you didn't hear
part of my short story discussion group.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with Estelle. We were in the same short story discussion group that started here at Chautauqua, continued through the pandemic. We do it on Zoom, so we have a lot of contact, a couple of times a month for over 5 years, right? So really amazing. But anyway, so I know Estelle, and also I related, deeply to that story. I'm in that same situation myself, and so I thought it rang quite true. Appreciate it.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to, you want to give it to
Hi, I'm interested in coming at it from the man's children's point of view. Like, I have my children that don't really, we live literally a half hour away from her grandparents, and we make a point to see each other, but it's busy. It makes me think about how I can establish a strong relationship so my parents aren't lonely, to see their grandchildren more. So it started making me think about my particular circumstance. So that was really personal, immediately personal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm shorter than everybody. Anyone else wants to say anything? Please feel free, but I'm going to the next story. I'm very cognizant of time. The next story I call Vanessa. My being smarter than my sister hadn't done me any good. Leslie is beautiful. Her curly blonde hair, blue eyes, and unearned athletic skills work wonders for her. Our mother likes her better. When she speaks to me at all, Mommy accuses me of being fat. I am definitely not fat. Far from it. Maybe chubby, athletic, not fat. Mommy is beautiful, taller than all her friends, voluptuous. Men openly stare at her. My father doesn't seem to notice, or maybe doesn't care. They don't like each other much. Because they have to share a bedroom, there are only two in the apartment, and Leslie and I share one. They never go to bed at the same time. After our 16th birthday party, I tried to kill myself. It's harder to accomplish than most people imagine. There are no ropes to hang yourself, no pills except Tylenol, and even I know that wouldn't work. No guns in this Brooklyn family, so I had to use a knife to slit my wrist. All it did was make a mess. After that, I decided I was a coward because it hurt. I didn't go deep enough. Mommy discovered the mess in our bathroom. She was furious. What the fuck do you think you're doing? Unlike in the TV soap, my mommy didn't take me to a shrink. She was sure I just did it for attention. My next escape plan was to get pregnant. I had never dated before, but knew plenty of guys at the park where I played tennis. Though I had a crush on Mark, everyone knew he was gay, so that was not a possibility, okay? And the guy had to be older, like in his 20s, a tennis player, someone who may have noticed my game. This was late April, so there weren't grown men out there playing tennis. I studied porno while I babysat. Excuse me. Okay. In late May, on the third day in the park, I saw Alex was alone, waiting for his partner. I didn't even have my racket with me. Walked over to him. We knew each other, but barely. He had 2 rackets. Can we hit till your friends come? But I need your racket. He's stronger, but I'm strategic. So beating me was no picnic. When his partner finally showed up, I knew him too. I asked Alex if we might make a date to play again. We did. My plan didn't work so fast. After graduating from Midwood High School, starting Brooklyn College, frequent tennis with Alex led to our dating for 4 months. I'm pregnant. Okay? Reaction. This one is 459 words. Okay? Does it work as flash fiction? The question of that are usually asked about that is whether the character becomes alive, whether the background adds something or detracts from what the character is described as going through, whether it piques your curiosity, or whether the limitation of 439 words actually makes it something difficult to follow. Okay, I'd like to turn it over to the group and invite your responses. Somebody want to say something back there? Do we have anyone brave here?
I'll mention one point.
Let me give you the mic.
I thought that the ending was perfect. I thought the fact that it was clipped, it was concise, it was bingo. I thought that was very, very good.
Thank you.
Of course, so. I feel like it's my job.
Yeah, I thought that the explicit I could get pregnant to escape thing, I guess it was a little jarring. Think of pregnancy as a way to get out of your situation, that you would use it as a tactic. to change your life and that sort of thing. And also, suicide in, desperate act. And she didn't seem desperate, you know what I mean? I didn't get enough of her to get her desperation. I mean, she's in a bad situation and parents argue and that sort of thing, but I didn't really feel her, that intensity inside.
Okay, so that's a failure in the writing.
Well, I don't know, unless you were trying to, get.
Okay, well, I'd like to ask the rest of the group if, in fact, that was true for you, that there wasn't enough to make it understandable why she was so depressed and had a profound need to escape. You want to say something? We have another writer in the group.
I kind of agree with that in that I felt like it was missing a little bit of the backstory for me to understand what would drive her to such depression, that she would take such drastic measures in the first place, which she failed at, and then try to find another way that really wasn't going to escape. So I kind of agree with that.
Okay. Did you hand it to the gal immediately after?
She's 16. She's desperate enough. That's all they need. And it doesn't make any sense to get pregnant to escape, but she's 16, so it doesn't need to.
Right.
How about here? Yeah, I think there's an openness to it that my brain started filling in the gaps, somewhat like poetry, that it's really limited words. So then I started developing the story in it. So I appreciated the openness.
Anyone back there like to say? Oh, Fred wants to say something.
Just an observation, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I thought the story was going to be about one thing, her relationship to her sister, but especially her sister. Well, because it's a great opening line, so that's what I expect the story to be about. And then it's not about that, or at least it doesn't use that to get to the desperation and all that. So you might think about whether the opening line is pointing you in a direction you need to go a little further in.
That's a very helpful comment. Thank you, Fred. I have to say that as a writer, I use real life and real life experience. When I was 16 and a friend of mine was in a situation very like this with a beautiful younger sister and a mother who was really extremely hostile to this second daughter who was heavier and less gorgeous. That stayed with me, the last time I had anything, and this gal, so this is, lots of fiction is connected in some way or other to the writer's life. In fact, was it last year I spoke here, I spoke about my novel Trapped, but somewhere I spoke about the fact that writers invariably use their life experience in their writing. And it's, that doesn't mean that we go, make it real, completely real. But we certainly integrate what is powerful for us in our own life. And my friend did make a suicide attempt. And it wasn't an effective one, thank goodness. She also married very, very young. She didn't get pregnant. So all the rest is fiction. But obviously, certain facts in our certain circumstances in our lives are so powerful that they integrate themselves over and over and over into our fiction, and it's inevitable. But Fred's point is important, which is the first sentence often could lead to a focus in short, especially in short fiction, not necessarily, in flash fiction, not necessarily in, the longer version, you know? Did you want to say something?
No, how do you define a short story versus flash?
Okay, well, I don't define it, but it's basically defined by, you know, the people who developed it to, limit of 1,000 words. Now, obviously, because I knew I was reading and I knew I had a certain amount of time, I limited it. I could rewrite this and will, in fact. This isn't going into, the way it is, into my book of short stories, which will be submitted for publication. It'll be reworked quite a bit. And I have the right to make it into something approaching 1,000 words. But I actually got a kick out of it, and I like to say one more thing, if I can. Do I have time to just finish up? Yes. Which is that practicing this has taught me a lot about how to write, a great deal, because you work very hard to make it relevant and focused. And so many times we lose that in the process of writing. So thank you all for your participation. I really appreciate it. And for you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Estelle. In some ways, I felt we've already had some Q&A, but we will move to Q&A in a moment. Just, I can share a couple of stray thoughts. There's flash fiction, you know, there's micro fiction. I know there's one magazine, Press 53. Each month they sponsor a contest to see who can write the best 53-word story. And you may have heard of the famous challenge that was given to Ernest Hemingway to write a 6-word short story. And he came up with, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Well, mic drop. Okay. So, are there any further questions, either for Estelle or for Janet? Yeah.
I mean, I just want to say to Janet, I think you embody Emily Bronte.
Thank you.
I mean, my goodness, I can't wait to read.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's the best compliment ever. Thank you.
What's hard to gauge, and this is sort of a question observation, is how much it will, well, what's your audience? Will it appeal to anybody who says, Emily who? Or doesn't know it's the truth already? Come on up. So, one of the things I pre-apologize for, this will be turned into a YouTube video, but I do not have the camera or the expertise to have included all these people who spoke. So we'll get these disembodied voices during that one second.
Well, my purpose in writing this was because I had such a love for Emily Bronte and the Moors and her character. I've always played devil's advocate for Heathcliff, refusing to believe he was totally evil. And so I want people to read it and I want people to like it, and I believe it's complete enough in itself that you don't have to have read Wuthering Heights to understand it, which is why I put in a few details here and there of what happened back in Wuthering Heights. But yeah, it was mainly my passion for Bronte and her novels is why I wanted to write it.
So I was interested in your writing style mimicking that time. How do you, with current writing style, go back in time like that?
Well, that is my genre, it's my time period. I think I live in the wrong phrase, in the wrong time period. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, and did find, for example, at one point I used the word snobby, that somebody was snobby, and then my editor and I looked at it and I'm like, wow, back then snob meant something totally different than what we would think of. And then I had Heathcliff playing poker, and I'm like, well, they didn't play poker then at that time. They played something called brag, which was similar to a shortened version. So It does take a lot of research to make sure you are honoring the time period and the author that you're writing out of respect for. So lots of research, but it was fun.
Any more questions for either author?
There are books up here if you want them, and business cards.
And I'll be making just a few closing announcements about upcoming events. On Thursday, the CLSC's election of the week, Liberation Day, by George Saunders, not by Donald Trump. We'll be speaking at the AMP at 10:45 on Thursday, not the usual 3:30 all philosophy presentation. The workshop version, an opera based on George Saunders, Lincoln in the Bardo, will be presented 3:15 this Friday in Norton Hall. Tomorrow on the court, there'll be a young readers discussion of The Family I'm In by Sharon Flake. And they might also mention How Sweet the Sound by an unknown author named Tommy Alexander. On Friday at 12:15, what they call the Summer on the Steps series. Adele Shaw will be reading from her work and discussing her craft. We used to have craft readings, craft talks, whether on Tuesday and Friday. This will be a flashback to that time. Some workshop participants will be reading their works as well, and it will be your first chance to hear the community poem that is being written this week. If you'd like to contribute to the community poem, either stop by the Poetry Makerspace or go to poetry.ch2.org, scroll down to community poem, click on how to submit, and then click on share your voice, and you'll see what the prompt is for the week. Our sister art theater presents Execution of Justice, opening this Saturday evening. And next week, at the Author's Hour, we have Skip Halpern with his nonfiction book, Wellspring of Work, Surprising Sources of Meaning and Motivation in Work. And Clara Silverstein, former head at the Writers' Center here, who has published a novel, a memoir, and cookbook, will be reading poetry from her latest book, Above the Fall Line. She's a true Renaissance woman of literature. Please also consider joining the Friends of the Chicago Writers' Center. Videos of this will be available on YouTube. If you search for Friends of the Chicago Writers' Center channel, you can see everything, all the readings from 2020 onward. At this point, I just thank you for being here. Take care. Bye-bye.
It would be feel honored because I'm trying really hard to
Me too.
Yes, just